The AMD-65 is a very unique Kalashnikov pattern firearm. It's the original Shorty AK. Before the Crank, before the Draco, we had the AMD-65. And if you saw my range video, I took this out to the range and it did fine. But this is an older design and there are a lot of modern improvements we can make on this rifle. Now, what I'm going to be doing to this is what I like to call a retro mod. It's where I modernize a firearm, but I retain those retro aesthetics. Some of the things I'm going to be swapping out, well, I've already swapped out that muzzle device there with the JMac RRD2C. I did that in my range video. This is lighter, shorter, and it works better than the AMD-65 muzzle brake. Now I'm going to be swapping out the handguard here. I'm going to retain this forward grip because this is very indicative of an AMD-65. If you lose that forward grip, it's just going to look like any old AK at that point. A big improvement I need to make on this thing is the stock. This stock works. It gives you this chin weld here, but I'll tell you, the rest of that day and the day after, my teeth were super sensitive from just the shock and vibration off of this stock here. So we're definitely going to improve that, and I want to add an optic. All right, so I'm going to swap the camera over to the workbench, give you a quick overview of some of the parts I'm going to be installing. We're going to throw them on this AMD-65, and you can let me know what you think about the retro mod once it's complete. All right, so let's take a look at some of the parts we're going to be installing. So first up, we have the JMac MMS handguard here. This is the 6.1 inch handguard, and this is going to be the same length as the AMD-65 handguard. So this area is going to look fairly similar, albeit it won't have this little angle on the bottom here. And like I said before, I want to reuse this forward grip here, as this is very aesthetic of the AMD-65. And for that, I have this RS Regulate M-Lock adapter that allows you to attach an AK pistol grip. So that's going to allow me to run this on this, and that should work out pretty well. For the optic setup, I'm going to be running the JMac T2 optic mount. I already have a HoloSun 503R attached to this, and that'll be attaching to the mount for the MMS handguard. In order to swap out that stock, I'm going to be using the JMac RSA AMD. This is a 1913 adapter, which completely replaces the factory stock. And it's going to allow me to run any stock I want. In this case, a JMac skeleton stock using the 1913 folding mech. So these are the main parts that I'm going to be using to retro mod this AMD-65. So let's get into it. I went ahead and stripped down the AMD-65 off camera just to save a little bit of time. If you're not sure how to do that, there's tons of great videos on YouTube that talk about how to completely disassemble an AK. So what I'm going to start with first, since I have it all disassembled here, is the stock. Because in order to install the RSA AMD, I'm going to have to drive out this factory stock pin. The factory stock is a folding stock, and you can see that there's a latch on one side and then this pin on the other is what actually holds it into place. So I'm going to go ahead and drive that pin out. I'm not going to be able to do it on camera just because this table is not quite strong enough. So I'm going to take it over to the wooden workbench, knock that pin out, and I'll be right back. All right, so that pin was fairly easy to drive out. One tip I would give you is you may want to remove your grip because that hole is very close and it can be tricky to kind of get in there without damaging your grip. So you may want to pop that off. And also, if you can't find a suitable punch, a cleaning rod actually will work to drive that pin out as well. And then once you have that pin removed, you can go ahead and just wiggle this out of place. We are free. There we go. So that was a tight fit there. There is the factory stock removed, and now it's going to be ready for that RSA AMD. So the RSA AMD is just going to sit in the slot where the factory stock used to be, and it is not designed to fold using the factory folding mech. So that's gonna hold it into place, and then you can go ahead and drive your pin back in. And we're back with the RSA AMD installed. I would again recommend removing this grip to get this pin in and out. I had to pop that off again and threw it back on there, but there it is installed. And we're gonna use that to mount the stock a little bit later on. But before we do that, let's get to the MMS handguard. So we have the handguard itself, the lower mount and the upper mount. Now, if you were running a railed gas tube, you would mount that to this upper mount here, but there is not currently a railed gas tube for the AMD-65, but there might be in the future. So we'll see what comes of that. But for now, let's go ahead and get this MMS installed. If you're not familiar with the MMS installation process, I do have an in-depth MMS install video that you can check out. But basically, we're gonna start off these 4 screws here, but we are not going to tighten them all the way up. So just kind of loosely put those in here because we want to have a little bit of wiggle room as we slide the upper mount into place. And then with the upper mount here, these 2 screws are the ones that are going to be used to attach the upper and lower mount. And when I install this upper mount, I want this notched portion to be towards the receiver. The notched portion towards the receiver. Just sit this into place here, and we can go ahead and attach our 2 screws. Now, as we screw these in, we want to make sure we are threading them equally. We don't want to tighten one up and then the other, otherwise it will add too much tension to one side, giving you a false feeling of torque, and you'll end up just stripping one of the sides. So I'm looking at the gap on the inside in between the upper and lower mount, and I want to keep that pretty even. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera. Probably not. In between the upper and lower mount, I'm trying to keep those even. And as you get towards the end, you want to kind of just hand tighten them. And then you want to make sure that this lower mount is going to be flush with the receiver. And you can go ahead and apply your final torque. Now, for the purposes of this video, I am not applying the actual torque and I'm not using thread locker, but I would highly recommend that you degrease and apply the medium strength thread locker to all of the threads. And once that upper and lower mount are together and you've applied the torque, we can finish it up by applying torque to these 4 screws here. And there is the MMS installed. We can slide our handguard retainer into place and lock that down. All right, so our lower handguard retainer is in position. It doesn't really do anything. It's just gonna be floating here and it'll act as our sling loop in the future. And before I get too far along, I want to go ahead and install this front grip here using the RS Regulate PGM, the AK for the M-Lock AK pistol grip mount. And what I want to do is I want to install this just slightly forward of where it is on the actual AMD mount. And that way I'll be able to insert and remove 30-round magazines more easily. So you can see here, you have the actual piece there in your M-Lock hardware. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the front grip from here and transfer it to this. All right, and you can see here I have the M-Lock hardware in place, and it looks like this is already threaded, so you're just gonna run the factory screw from your grip into here. So you just wanna make sure that it's in the right direction. So for my purposes, I want this to be backwards, so I need that to be angled this way, so I have that RS Regulate logo towards the front. Now I compared it to the factory AMD-65 handguard there, and if I have it all the way in the rear, it's going to be very similar to the AMD-65, so I'm just going to bump it one up to right there. I'm going to go ahead, throw this in place, and attach the grip. All right, so there is the RS Regulate adapter. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and attach the AMD-65 grip to it. All right, so there it is installed. And if I compare that to the factory grip, or the factory handguard, and this is where the grip nut would be, you can see it's about an inch or so forward. So that should really help us when it comes to using those 30-round magazines. All right, so I can go ahead and reinstall the gas tube into place. And now let's attach the Optic. The JMac Optic mount has these 4 screws here, and these correspond with the screws here in the top of the lower mount. So actually I'm going to have to go ahead and pop this back up, and that'll allow me to go ahead and install my Optic mount. When I install these Optic mounts, I like to go ahead and make sure all the threads are started, and then I'll start kind of bringing them down. And I want to just get them all just to where I feel that tension begin. And I am torquing these up in a star pattern. I'm not applying the final torque here. I'm just getting these all going. And then once they're all in place, you can go ahead and apply the final torque to all of these. Again, if you're not familiar with the MMS Handguard install, I do have a video. There's also a step-by-step guide on the JMac website, and it lists all of the torque values for all of these screws. I've installed so many of these MMS handguards and Optic mounts that I have a pretty good idea of the feel for what each screw is supposed to be at. And I know that's famous last words, but works pretty good for me so far. And there's the Optic mount attached. Very simple setup there. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble the AMD-65. And the MMS handguard does allow you to use your factory cleaning rod, so I'm going to throw that in as well. And there we go. Sometimes those cleaning rods can be a little bit tricky to find their home, but it is back into place. Now that we have everything put together, last up is the actual stock itself. Here I have the JMac Customs SS 9RP, 9 inches with the riser. I have a 0.25 cheek riser on top of that, and it has the rubber butt pad. Now I've attached it to the FM-SM 1913 folding mech, and this mech can be swapped to flipped so it can fold to either side. I have this folding to the right side, which is the same side as the factory folder, but you can have it fold to the left side if you want, and we'll see how it works on the right side here. And you can also adjust it a little higher, a little bit lower. There's 2 screw holes to give you a little bit of more options there. And let's go ahead and throw it on there. All right, so I changed my mind. I flipped it over just so it would fold to the other side here, and that way it's not blocking the charging handle or the safety or anything like that. So boom, there we go. That's everything. So we upgraded our stock, added an Optic, the handguard, the muzzle device, and we still have the forward grip on there as well. So like I said, I bumped that about 1 inch forward, so obviously our tankers are gonna fit no problem. But now our 30 rounders are gonna effortlessly fit as well. So that worked out really good there. So there it is, the Retro Mod AMD-65. So my goal here was to modernize some of the components, but still maintain that AMD-65 vibe And I think that I did that here today. Let me know what you think about the AMD 65 retro mod down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.